On Tuesday, we talked a lot about the hot hand, the idea of where if you make a shot, or if you have a success, that it affects your ability for the next attempt. All right. So if I shoot and make my shot, my ability to make my next shot increases if I have the hot hand. All right. Now, as we all know, you can be on a hot streak. You have a hot hand, you're winning, you're being successful a lot. Or you can be like the Cleveland Browns or the Philadelphia 76ers and be on cold streaks. All right? So what we need to do is we need to actually look at, like, so we're drawing conclusions based on having a hot hand. Right? We're trying to figure out if he has a hot hand. But what about, how do we use that? How do we use the hot hand to apply to teams that are not that good? Or maybe they're on a losing streak. All right? So it turns out, and then that little green little star right there with that, that's actually important, and you make sure you write that down, is assuming the outcomes are not independent, all right? So assuming that the ability changes based on your previous attempt, a long streak of failures is also evidence that a player or team has a greater ability to be successful following a success than following a failure. All right? So if mathematically we determine that a team is on a cold streak or has a cold hand, all right, then that is also evidence that a player or a team has a greater ability to be successful following a success. Okay? Now, why is that? All right, that might not make sense. If a team sucks, or if a team has been losing a lot, or if a player is missing a lot of shots, how does that tell us? Right? They're on that cold streak. How can we use that? How does that tell us that they could go, that they still have a greater ability to be successful? All right. Well, so maybe they start winning. Maybe they start taking the shot. So let's look at this. All right. So let's assume, consider a team has an ability of 50% to win. All right. So they have a 50% chance to win. They have a 50% chance to lose. Now, we are assuming, all right, we are assuming that their outcomes are not independent. So the previous outcomes affect the future outcomes. Okay? So if that's the case and they win, all right, just like what it says, all right, up here. A team has a greater ability to be successful following a success. So if this team wins, all right, this team wins, then they have a greater chance of winning the next game. They have a greater ability. So 50% might increase, let's say, to 55%. They got it. They win their first game. Now they have a 55% chance to win the next game. Why did you 55? No, it's just a nice number to increase. All right. Now, if their ability increases to 55% to win, well, that would mean that their ability to lose would decrease by 5% to 45%. There's already accurate. Alright, so this went down, the ability to lose went down 3%, or 5%. Now, we can do the same thing. We move back over here. They have a 50% chance to lose, so they lose their first game. Okay? Now, it's the same thing. If they lose, they have a greater ability to lose again. Right? Because if they fail, they have a greater ability to fail at following a failure. Okay? So let's say that increases to 55%. They lose again. And then that would be 45%. They win. All right, and it would continue on. So now they're on a 2-game losing streak. All right. So on a 2-game losing streak, now their ability to win would be 40%, and then their ability to lose would be 60%. All right. You get the pattern right there. Now, is it going to decrease 5% in real life? No, it might be 1%. I'm just using 5%. Huh? You don't have to. I just want to make a point here. Because the question is this: why does having a losing streak or a cold streak give us enough evidence to say that okay, they also have the ability to go on a hot streak or have the hot hand? Why is that? Well, because they could start winning, right? So they could start winning. There's always an option. They lose. There's a possibility they may win after their loss. Okay? So let's start right here. All right. They have a 40% chance. Okay. So they lose, and they have a 40% chance of winning. And guess what? They win. All right. So next, they would have a 45% chance of winning, and a 55% chance at losing. Okay. Now they can continue going though, right? They could win. Let's say they win again. So then that's it. They win. So that's at 50% now. So that's at 50%. Well, let's say they win again. So that's at 55% now. So how that all started? That all started with a loss, and then followed by another loss. But then they started winning. So what we see is, even though we had evidence of them being on a cold streak, now that is also saying that is the same thing as saying we have evidence of them being able to get on a hot streak. That makes sense? So what we want to conclude is this. If a team has a greater ability to win after a win than after a loss, then they will also have a greater ability to lose after a loss than after a win. All right? So what we're saying is, if we determine that the team has a greater ability to win following a win, so what we're saying is if a team has a greater ability to win after a win than after a loss, then they will also have that greater ability to lose after a loss. All right? So that allows us to, draw conclusions regardless of whether or not on a hot shoot or a cold shoot. Okay? So now, here's the thing. Is there a way for us to sort of, instead of using the word hot hand or cold hand or hot streak and cold streak, is there a way for us to say, all right, so if the team's on a hot streak, they also have the ability to go on a cold streak. If the team is on a cold streak, they also have the ability to go on a hot streak. All right, a bunch of streaking here. All right, so if the team can streak either way, what we end up calling them is we end up saying, you know what? This team is a streaky team. They go on winning streaks and losing streaks. They don't really, they typically win a bunch of games and lose a bunch of games. Typically win. All right. So what we can end up saying then, and we're going to change the way we state our alternative hypotheses, is. Is because both types of streaks support the claim that a team has a greater ability to win following a win than following a loss. We will now claim that an athlete or team is streaky in the alternative hypothesis, rather than claiming that the athlete or team has a hot hand. out. So what that means is, if you remember, if you recall, on Tuesday we did an example of Tony Romo, and we said that we were like, Tony Romo has a hot hand. That was our alternative hypothesis. Well, instead of saying Tony Romo has a hot hand, what we would say now is Tony Romo is streaky, or Tony Romo is a streaky player. Right? So, moving from this, what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example. Alright. And what you'll see is, in this case coming up, is that we're not looking at a team that has a winning streak or a hot hand. We're going to look at a team that has a cold streak and determine if they were a streaky team. Right? Because if a team is streaky, that means they have the ability to there's a chance they may have a greater ability. So if the team is streaky, that means they have a greater ability to make a shot after a made shot than following a missed shot, or they have a greater ability, and they have a greater ability to miss a shot following a missed shot. So, what we're going to do, okay, and you do not need to write all this down. I'm going to explain this to you. Okay. This problem is very similar to number 5 on your homework. All right. Each section where it says problem, okay, those belong, or those correlate with problem on your homework. All right. This problem is very similar to number 5. So what I need you to write down here is this list of numbers or letters that represents the wins and losses for the game day back. So you have that. And then we're going to answer these questions together. So in case you cannot see that, what you need to do is write down this street. I'm going to tell you the letters. All right? It is WW, LL, L, WW, LL, W, L, 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 W. That's 2 wins, 3 losses, 2 wins, 2 losses, 1 win, 5 losses, 1 win. Okay. So what it says is, in the 2008 regular season, the Green Bay Packers had 6 wins and 10 losses, highlighted by a streak of 5 consecutive losses in the second half of the season. Does this streak of 5 losses in a row provide convincing evidence that the Packers were a streaky team? Yeah. So right here. All right, so See where it says explain what it means to say that the outcomes of Packers games are independent. If you look at problem 5A, alright, on part A for problem 5 on your homework, you'll notice it asks the exact same question. So what you may want to do is you're going to write down the answer to the question and put down like 5A, so you can see what the answer should look like for your problem 5A on your homework. Alright, so can someone explain to me what it means to say that the outcomes of Packers games are independent? Good. They said the previous game, whether it's a win or loss, does not affect the current game. That's good. My answer is not exactly like that, but it's the exact same thing as good. The outcome of the Packers next game is not based on the outcome of the previous game. Alright, so you want to get that down. Something like what James said, or that. The outcome of the Packers next game is not based on the outcome of the previous game, or the previous game, whether it's a win or a loss, does not affect the outcome of the next game. Good job, James. Alright, so you understand what it means for stuff to be independent. Now, we need to come up with a hypothesis, or hypotheses. Null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. So can we come up with a null hypothesis? Can you help us? Can you help? Yeah. All right. Can you help us? Say it again. Team is not I don't know how to exactly say it. Can James, let me help you here. I want you to restate yours. If the team is not, if the team is not streaky, what's one of our vocabulary words that we have that says stuff is not streaky? Cold answer is cold streak. Who? Independent? Independent. Yeah. Independent means that a team is not streaky. Okay? Independent means that if, in this case, the Green Bay Packers would have the same ability to win a game, or the same ability to be successful following a win and following a loss. So what I want you to do, I want you to write down, so then we'll job again. So notice what I write. The Green Bay Packers have the same ability to win following a win and following a loss. And here's what James said. The outcome of the Packers games are independent. They are. They are not streaky. Alright? So if being not streaky is what they are, then that means they're independent. Good job. I want you to try to use the vocabulary words we talked about in our hypotheses and stuff. All right. Makes sense. So now, can someone now tell me what our alternative hypothesis might be? Following Dan following the loss. Good job, man. So a way to write the alternative hypothesis would be the game attackers have a greater ability to win following a win than following a loss. Or somewhere here. The Packers are a streaky team. So let's write down both of those again. Because I want you to see how there's more than one way to write these hypotheses. And one of them uses the vocabulary words that we just defined. So, is that making sense how I mean, for the most part, I feel like you guys have done a pretty good job on hypotheses and investigation. So now, we need to describe how to simulate the distribution of the test statistic. Keeping in mind the test statistic is the longest streak. So we want to describe how to simulate this, assuming that the outcomes of Packers games are independent. So first of all, what would be our test statistic if I'm telling you? Okay, 1, 5, 2. How do you do that?
How many losses they have in a row?
Not just losses, that's the longest streak. So if you go back and look, the longest streak happens to be 5 losses. There's only a streak of 2, streak of 2, and those are streaks. Alright, so it's the longest streak. Alright, so good. Oh, look at that, what do you know? There was something there, hold on. Alright, so, longest streak is equal to 5. Okay, I didn't forget. So this was 5A, 5B, this is like 5C. Alright, let's take 5C. Now, Janaya, see if you can help me out here. I need to simulate this using note cards. How many note cards did I need? And how would you find it out? How did you do that? It's correct. How did you Good. Alright. So Okay, so you get 16 total cards because that is the total number of games. Good job. All right. Now, we're not just going to have 16 blank note cards, are we? No. So Juan, can you help us? What are we going to label? What are we going to put right on these note cards? Huh? Well, I'm going to put it along the street. Along the street is, I'm not going to write that on the note card. What are you going to write on the note card? What do the streets consist of? Want to help out? I'm going to write wins and losses on the cards. Now, here's my question. How many cards are going to have the word win in there? How'd you get that? Not half. 6 and 10 is okay, yeah, they had 6 wins. How many cards are going to have the word loss in? 10. Why? Yeah, 10 losses. So, we have label 6 cards with win, that's the total wins they have. 10 cards with loss, because that's the total losses they have. So, after that, are we just going to be like, I got cards, keep in my hands and do nothing? We're going to shuffle them first, and then lay them out in chronological order. That way I can see what was the result of the first game, second game, third game, fourth game, fifth game. All right? So, lay them out. Cards and lay them out randomly. And the last thing I need to do. See the longest, spot out the longest streak is good. That was not too hard, was it? Almost seems like you guys already knew the answers. Alright. So, now, what we're going to look at now is we have the simulate, so we know how to simulate it, right? So now what we need to do is we need to actually come up with, first of all, I'm not going to ever make you simulate this by hand. On Tuesday, you guys will learn how to use the iPads to do that. So what we need to do is look at the dot plot that has the simulations. All right, so there's a dot plot. So this is like 5V. Right? This is like on 5V on your It says, here are the results of 100 trials of the simulation described above. Describe what information is provided by the dot plot below. So what information is provided by the dot plot? So it's the longest streak in the simulated seasons. Alright? So what it tells us is this. Right? So it's telling us that the Green Bay Packers, alright, in their 6 and 10 season, could expect to get a streak between 2 games and 8 games, just due to random chance. A 6 and 10 team could expect to have a longest streak of 2 to 8 games in a season due to random chance. Start 5 feet, is gonna help you, so that you see it in there with that hand, they work on your homework, a little bit of like guidance. Alright? Alright. So now that we know what the dot plot shows us, we now need to figure out the p-value and what the p-value tells us. So how do we find the p-value? What?
Mark out on the graph and counting,
Why am I marking 5 on the graph?
because that's the longest, and I'm sure.
It's a test statistic, right? So you find 5 on the graph, which happens to be right there. And then what we do with them, James?
You count from that way, inside 5 meters.
Okay, so between 5 and 8, count off, it's gonna be 41. Okay? So, our p-value is 41 out of 100, because it's on the dots. And that's equal to 41%. So our p-value is 41%.
Which is 5.
What do you say? Yeah, it's like 5. Alright, so I want to tell you what the interpretation of p-value is, because this is the part where I found that most people have their struggle. So, assuming that the outcomes are independent, that's important. Assuming that the outcomes are independent, yes, then there is still part of 5E. Then there is a 41% chance of getting a streak of 5 or longer simply by random chance. Okay? So, assuming that the outcomes are independent, then there is a 41% chance of getting a streak of 5 or longer simply by random chance. Alright. So, here's the good thing, or here's the nice thing. So now, everything after this is exactly the same. And up to this point, it's also been, pretty similar. So now we have to take this and we have to come up with a conclusion. And how do we come up with a conclusion? We either are going to reject our null hypothesis or we're gonna fail to reject our null hypothesis. Alright? And it's all based on the evidence. Now, we needed our p-value to do that, right? So, so what do we do now? Say it one more time. Over or under? Over, we do what? Two. Which one? Good. Is this over 5%? So, since the p-value is greater than 5%, greater than or equal to 5%, then we fail to reject our null hypothesis. This is 5F, by the way, because it's homework, and or they refer to. We do not have convincing evidence that the Packers were a streaky team. It's possible that their streak of 5 losses was due to random shakes. So that's our conclusion. Now, there's one last thing that we need to talk about. Right? That's not part of the answer or anything. It's just I want us to make sure that we understand what we mean when we say we fail to reject our null hypothesis. Oh man, chop that bug. So, here's what we need, alright? This is important that you get this down. Just because we do not, alright, or we fail to reject our null hypothesis, just because we do not reject the null hypothesis, this does not mean that the outcomes are independent. Okay? So if we fail to reject our null hypothesis, that does not mean, alright, that does not mean that the outcomes are independent. Alright? What it means is that we just don't have enough information to prove or to get, we don't have enough convincing evidence that that team was streaky. Okay? So it's important to make sure you know and make that distinguishing factor is that if we fail to reject our null hypothesis, we are not saying the outcomes are independent. No, it was just something you need to know. What? Yeah, it's a side note. Alright. Now, here's what I'm going to, or here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to give you guys time to work on your topics. Alright? How many of you guys probably get this done? If you put your mind to it,